would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California. Member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to it, folks. It's the middle of the week. It's that time when we look back and see the same amount of time as when we look forward to the next weekend. Hope you all are making good progress towards whatever your goals for this week might be. It's Wednesday, September 28th, 2016. Got sort of a follow-up story, something we discussed a while back, but it is now a reality, so I wanted to cover that and sort of remind folks about some of the bigger implications of this particular story, so we'll touch on that one in just a second. But before we do, let's go ahead and remind everyone about how to reach out. Head on over to therebelbroker.com. From there, you can contact me using the Contact the Rebel Broker item there on the menu. Send any ideas, suggestions, observations, questions, what have you, and I'll be happy to give you whatever answer I can. And, of course, we're still entering folks for the $50 raffle or the $50 drawing for the $50 Amazon gift card, which we're going to do on October 1st. All you have to do to participate is click on the button that says take the survey to support the show at the very tippy top of the page at therebelbroker.com. Provide your email address and name to the first screen. Click on take the survey. Then in the survey, when it asks you for your email address, use the same email address you used in that first screen. And you are officially entered. You're done. You're ready to go. If you have already done it, even prior to me creating the inducement, the $50 gift card inducement, you are still entered. So don't worry about having to repeat the process. The only folks who will have to do it again would be those who were kind enough to take a few minutes out of their day but did not include an email address. And the last time I was able to check the comprehensive list, it looked like there were about 6 folks who had not submitted an email address. So there are a few of you out there. And if you want to go ahead and register again and just use your email address, that'll put you in the drawing and you will be covered. The other little tidbit I usually like to cover is how to easily become a member of the Insiders Club. That's the folks who will get the occasional newsletter, updated information, free content, that type of wonderful stuff. The folks who are going to get let in on the new things coming to the show before everybody else. The best way to do that is to text the word Rebel Broker to 44222. That's the word Rebel Broker, texting it to the number 44222. Then follow the prompts and you're all set. For those of you who've been listening for a while, you know that we discussed some changes to how credit is tracked. It was interesting because at the time, what they were laying out was kind of a dumbing down of credit ratings. It was taking into account things that really have nothing to do with your credit worthiness. And they were going to be sort of rolling this in to the new tools being used to analyze your credit worthiness. Now, we were talking about this specifically as it related to Fannie Mae's Desktop Underwriter version 10.0. And as of this last weekend, it is officially launched, this particular software. It uses trended credit, a change that could, and I'm quoting now, a change that could open up the credit box to potential borrowers previously unable to get a mortgage due to their credit history. So even without looking at the specifics, and this is what blows me away, folks. Without even getting into the specifics, they make very clear what the goals of this are: to open up credit to more borrowers. Now, this is exactly what was happening with the subprime lending tactics. It is simply being used in a different way. Previously, it was a thing being pushed out onto the folks who would draw up the paperwork, and then the underwriters, as long as they dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, you could do all this crazy lending to subprime borrowers. And remember, when you're talking about a subprime loan, you're not talking about the money that you're lending. There's nothing subprime about money. They're not talking about the property. You're talking about the qualifications of the borrower. So, and I occasionally come across folks who are confused about that term. That's what it means. It means that under normal credit analysis circumstances, you most likely would not get a loan. And we were doing it in this very kind of in-your-face way with no down payment loans, with stated income, all kinds of different things, all absolutely being supported by the system and the process, including Fannie, Freddie, and FHA and all these folks. And all this did was balloon the number of buyers. It artificially, because normally these folks, under normal credit analysis standards, these folks would not have been able to get the kind of loans they were getting. If someone had this sort of challenged credit history, and that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about people who have a history of non-payment, who have a history of not perhaps paying on time. Maybe they just have no credit at all. Maybe they're just too young or too early in their careers to have developed any sort of credit. But and think of it as another way. Think of it as your credit reputation. When you pay your bills on time and you take a bill to its full, a loan to its full conclusion, meaning, let's say you bought that car, you got a 4-year loan on it, you paid it on time every month, and you finished it off after 4 years. Well, that really works in your favor. You've proven you can pay something when you promise you're going to pay it, and you can continue to pay it until the conclusion of the agreement. You have fulfilled your end of the deal. Subprime borrowers are folks who are unable to prove they can do that. That's what it means to be a subprime loan. It means that the person borrowing the money is subprime, riskier, someone who has not proven their creditworthiness. In the last iteration of stupid credit decisions, we simply looked at those folks as folks who just needed to sort of get a helping hand. If given the pride of ownership, et cetera, everything would work itself out. So all these buyers were created, and you just ended up creating more buyers per property that was on the marketplace. And that's what ramped up prices so ridiculously leading up to the downturn, where we had our big real estate bubble. And what collapsed? All of those loans collapsed. The subprime is really where everything collapsed. It was a ridiculous cascade that an awful lot of people identified ahead of time and thought things were nuts and we should be worried. Okay, so you would think lesson learned, right? Well, now, this again, it blows my mind that now the tactic isn't, let's just create, instead of saying, let's create programs specifically designed to loan to people who are subprime borrowers. That shtick, that whole subprime word now has a stigma to it. So let's just make these folks, quote unquote, prime by lowering the standards on which we judge people's creditworthiness. That is what this is. This is changing the way credit is analyzed and looked at to emphasize things that have nothing to do with your creditworthiness, nothing to do with any amount you've borrowed. Now, we can go ahead and jump through these hoops here and kind of get a better view. The article that I'm referring to here is coming to us from Housing Wire. But even before we go any further, they're making very clear what the goal is. They want to create more borrowers. They want to circumvent, let's use the terms that we absolutely could have used in 2005. Exact same words. This is a plan that circumvents current lending standards or prudent lending standards in favor of allowing people who are less creditworthy to qualify for loans. That statement is absolutely true by the stated goal of this change today, and we can apply the exact same statement to what led up to the downturn in 2006, 2007. That should worry people. So there's that, right? So there's the getting more borrowed money into the hands of folks who aren't in a position to comfortably bear the burden, right? See, that's the other part of this equation that really annoys me. It reeks of a process that wants to make the people putting it in place feel better at the expense of the credit of the people that they're giving it to. You're giving someone something that they haven't learned how to deal with, as demonstrated through their poor credit history. You're not doing anyone a favor by making it possible for them to borrow way more than they can afford. And when I say afford, I mean that in two ways. One, yeah, they're straight financial math in terms of what makes sense for them, but they can't afford it based on their level of knowledge on how to manage their debt. It's going to be an expensive mistake for them, just like it was an expensive mistake for all the folks who went through this last time. When all that was said and done, could we honestly say we had helped all those people who'd borrowed all that money? No, of course not. Okay. Quoting from the article, and I believe this is a quote from a Fannie Mae person, Marianne Sullivan, Senior Vice President of Single Family Business Capabilities with Fannie Mae, was quoted as saying, "Desktop Underwriter transformed the industry when it was introduced over 20 years ago. Today's Desktop Underwriter 10.0 enhancements highlight the continued investments and improvements we're making in our technology to be better partners for our customers and to provide access to mortgage credit for creditworthy borrowers." It goes on to say that the new program, while much anticipated, went through some difficulties to implement. Fannie Mae unexpectedly delayed the use of trended credit data in mid-June, only days before it was supposed to be released, on the weekend of June 25th. I believe that's when we first discussed this. But the trended credit data is now there, and according to this article, they believe it could be a game changer. Trended credit data, according to Fannie Mae, allows a smarter, more thorough analysis of the borrower's credit history and helps creditworthy borrowers obtain access to mortgage credit and sustainable home ownership. Currently, credit reports used in mortgage lending only indicate the outstanding balance and if a borrower has been on time or delinquent on existing credit accounts such as credit cards, mortgages, or student loans. Through trended data, lenders can access the monthly payment amounts that a consumer has made on these accounts over time. This latest update to the Desktop Underwriter is significant because it includes the requirement that lenders must begin using trended credit data when underwriting single-family borrowers. Fannie Mae is working with Equifax and TransUnion to provide the data. There are several key changes when it comes to the use of trended credit data. Let's see. Here's a basic list. There's really just 3 items that they'd note. First, it considers the monthly payment amounts that a consumer has made on revolving accounts such as credit cards over the past 2 years. Next, it offers lenders more insight into how a borrower tends to pay off their revolving credit lines each month, providing a more comprehensive risk assessment. Gives borrowers greater ability to control their credit evaluation and benefits borrowers who regularly pay off or pay more than the minimum amount required of their revolving debt, increasing the likelihood that they will receive an approved recommendation from the Desktop Underwriter. Further, if I'm not mistaken, now, interestingly, most of these articles that I'm reading discussing this don't bring up some of the things that we had noted in previous articles that talked about, quote-unquote, non-traditional credit. There's one question, if you go to the detail page from Fannie Mae, that says, when the borrower without traditional credit lives rent-free and does not have a housing-related source of non-traditional credit, could the loan be eligible for delivery to Fannie Mae? So it's interesting that they kind of phrase it this way, but it makes reference to non-traditional credit. Now, if we're going off of the same definition we originally got when this article came out, non-traditional credit sources are things like your power bill, your water bill, things that normally weren't considered. And these are things that are given weight for folks who don't have a lot of credit history. And to be very honest, none of those things say anything about your ability to manage credit. It doesn't say anything about your ability to enter into a long-term borrowing agreement wherein you have regular payments of a fixed amount that then end at a certain time, or you have a revolving credit like a credit card where the amount is managed, the amount of debt and payment and all these things are managed on a month-to-month basis in concert with your income. A credit card does that. A credit card's always been part of your normal credit rating, but all these other things don't. When you don't pay your power bill, your power gets turned off. When you don't pay your phone bill, your phone gets turned off. These are not credit. No one's loaning you money. Someone's giving you a service for which you are supposed to pay based on your consumption or based on a flat rate that you've agreed to consume that. So it's very difficult to make the argument, I think, that these are things that should be given any weight in your credit worthiness for a mortgage. But yet we're doing that. And I actually tend to disagree in general with this statistical game they're kind of playing in terms of trending. Trends are all great, but the bottom line is if you don't make payments, you didn't make the payment. Or if you made the payment late, you made the payment late. This seems like a way to try to normalize a bad credit action by letting the surrounding numbers normalize it. So that's a problem I've got with this, and I think it basically does do what we're describing here. It tends to dumb down the process. It tends to make it easier for folks to get credit. Now, the other part of this discussion has really nothing to do with this particular aspect of it, with whether or not this is a smart decision one way or the other in terms of fooling with how creditworthiness is measured. I want to cover the other side of that coin in just a second, but we're going to take a quick break here. We'll be right back right after this. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner, broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Welcome back, everyone. We're talking about the changes to the desktop underwriter software for Fannie Mae. We talked about this a few weeks ago, or actually I think it was a couple of months ago now, when it was first mentioned. We discussed the potential impact. We've sort of reviewed that again here in terms of this trended data and non-traditional credit sources that are now, to a certain extent, dumbing down the standard. And that's not even hypothetical on my part. I mean, you could say, Robert, listen, this trended stuff, this isn't dumbing anything down. Non-traditional credit sources, totally normal, totally okay. Okay, let's pretend that that's an absolutely valid thing to say. Let's look now at the other side of the coin. We already know that the intended stated purpose is to facilitate more people being able to borrow money. That translates into more buyers. Now, no matter how you slice it, creating more buyers than the ones who are currently making it through the filter indicates lesser qualified buyers will be in the pool. Because this sure as hell isn't aimed at adding more people at the high end of borrowing, right? This isn't meant to address a problem of people who are too qualified to get a loan. So no matter what argument you want to throw at me, or whether or not you want to say the things I'm specifically pointing out make any sense or not, the entire stated purpose of this change is to create additional buyers. So there you go. So now it's time to think about what kind of sense does it make in today's market to create more buyers. Now, in my marketplace, it makes no sense to create more buyers. None at all. The only effect that will have in my marketplace is to increase home prices because you'll simply have more demand. And this is nuts. The idea of wanting to create more buyers, and even if you want to get into the argument, because what amazes me is if people would just think to the next 2 or 3 steps, they'd realize they're not helping anyone with this stuff. By doing this, you create more buyers. Those buyers now jump into a local market. Because of their addition to the local market, because the supply isn't increasing, and because the supply doesn't increase based on the fact there are more buyers just organically, or at least it isn't, prices go up. Because now instead of having 2, 3 people per home for sale making offers, how many now are you going to have? Are you going to have 1 more? Are you adding 1? Are you adding 2? How many people are you adding to the mix for each one of these properties? Now, of course, it's not an even spread, right? The homes that fit a certain price range with certain amenities tend to be the ones that garner the largest number of interested borrowers. But what you're doing is creating a scenario where now these borrowers, because of the fact you've included them, are serving as part of the process that will push prices higher. And you've done this artificially. You've done this by changing the rules of how people are gauged in their ability to borrow money. That does not solve the side of the equation we need to solve. Now, we've talked about that yesterday. We talked about even considering embracing the idea of mobile homes or manufactured homes, I guess is really what people prefer to call them now. In fact, you know what? I can't even remember the last time I saw a quote-unquote mobile home that was one of those classic, except for maybe the construction site, right, that still had wheels. But I can't remember the last time I've seen a mobile home park that had newer mobile homes that were of that type. I've seen newer mobile home parks that have what I would describe more as a manufactured home. It looks more like a regular house, more boxy, because they're still putting it in those however long. I can't even remember how long those things are, 50-something feet by something feet, and you just keep pushing them together to create a bigger place. But in any event, we've even gone down that road. And for those of you who've been listening to me for a while, you know I am not an enthusiastic mobile home / manufactured home guy. But at this point, I'm willing to explore any options, right, depending on how we want to try to solve this problem. But the point here is that we're not even there yet. Nobody anywhere is pushing for making it easier from a regulatory or cost standpoint for developers to create great little communities based on manufactured housing or mobile homes. No one's talking about building developments here in the Silicon Valley area that are going to be very much focused on middle of the road price range buyers. None of that's going on. I could go down the list. I subscribe to a ton of different lists that tell me about new housing developments going on in Silicon Valley. Cheapest ones I've seen are $800,000. Typically, it's over $1 million. I just saw a couple come on that were going to be starter homes. That's what they were quoted as. Starter homes between $1.5 and $2.1 million. We are not solving a problem with that. And we sure as heck aren't solving the problem for folks who are at this end of the credit spectrum. A, we're not solving a problem. We're making a problem worse. And B, we are potentially saddling these folks with debt that they cannot manage. And the only prayer we have of this not screwing these people over is if these homes continue to appreciate. Because if they don't continue to appreciate, if they go down at all, a lot of these folks are putting down very little money, from 3% to 0%. Those loans are still out there. I occasionally now get folks sending me info about 0% loans in their area that they've come across. It's absolutely nuts. And it's all the same kind of nuts we've already seen. So what do we do? I mean, there's nothing we can do. Is this a thing where we need to sort of take a step back and realize where this is most impacted? Where are the markets hitting these crazy prices the most? And will this make it worse? Because you can absolutely make the argument. Remember, this just happened on the weekend. So now we're potentially going to see more buyers. It's going to be interesting to see how that affects local marketplaces. So where should you be most wary of this? I came across an interesting article. The global housing sorry. The global housing bubble is biggest in these 6 cities. There's a pretty good representation of American cities here. So I thought I'd go down this list and sort of point out where the bubble's the biggest. I think these are areas where I absolutely would not buy unless I have somehow managed to stumble across a ridiculous deal of some kind that I can absolutely demonstrate to myself as something that's amazing. Now, I'll go ahead and go through the whole list, even the international ones, because that's kind of fun too. There's really only one, according to this list, that's being categorized as total bubble risk. Or excuse me, there's only 2 that are listed as bubble risk, and they're not in this country. And then there's only one that's listed as overvalued, 2 that are listed as fair valued, and 1 that's listed as depressed, which I find odd. So let's go ahead and run down this list. This list is more than 6. This list is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It's 15 long. But it might be interesting just to go over these ones that are considered to be overvalued. Number 1 is London, and it's considered to be at a bubble risk. Hong Kong is next at a bubble risk. Then we drop down to just being overvalued, and it's Sydney, Vancouver. San Francisco is on that list, and I absolutely agree with that. And I think the local population agrees with it, given how many people are now not buying in San Francisco, but choosing to buy outside of San Francisco. Next on the list is Amsterdam, then Geneva, then Zurich, then Paris, Frankfurt, Tokyo, Singapore, and that's the last of the overvalued. And then fair valued is listed. New York and Boston are listed as fair valued. I'm not 100% sure I buy that. I think in looking at this particular chart, it might be a case of it sort of being right on the borderline in terms of where it stands and sort of in terms of value. I'll be honest, I don't have enough ground truth in New York and Boston to really make a guess, but I'll tell you some of the things I've heard about real estate in New York is nuts. So it wouldn't be it wouldn't be my go-to assumption on places that were appropriately valued. Interesting to note, though, Chicago is considered undervalued, given the other challenges of Chicago. We've talked about this before. That absolutely spells opportunity. Don't get me wrong. But we all know that Chicago is a ridiculously challenging city in terms of a lot of stuff going on that is creepy as all get out. And headaches I just wouldn't want to have to worry about as a homeowner who would be renting. And I'd have to have so much ground truth about what's going on in Chicago and where I was buying. I'd absolutely consider it, but I'd have to put aside a good week, at least a week of effort ahead of time, talking to people online who live in Chicago, work in Chicago, do real estate in Chicago, who can really educate me on the areas that look good or look promising or that are on the upswing. Because if you can't figure out the local market momentum, and when I say local market, I'm not saying Chicago, I'm saying neighborhoods of Chicago, figure out what direction those places are going. And there's such because of what I'm saying, I mean, what I just prefaced this comment with, there's a huge stigma on Chicago. So absolutely, in that kind of craziness, there's absolutely opportunities for folks who have the insights, who have the information to make an amazing investment. Will Chicago stay like that forever? No. If you were to visit downtown New York in the 70s, we would be saying the same things that we're now saying about Chicago. So not being able to sort of spot where areas are going to be shifting and improving is short-sighted. Remember, if you've ever seen photos of Times Square in New York in the 70s, just porno theaters, nasty stuff all over the place, not a good place, right? And that went through a huge turnaround. So it's none of these things are set in stone. These are all things that can change with the ebb and flow of what people are doing in a city. But clearly, Chicago is a challenged place right now. And if you're going to go ahead and jump in, you're going to want to jump in with eyes wide open and with as many smart advisors on that area as you can possibly find. Okay, I wanted to wrap up today's show with a heads up. This is the kind of information I like to share because it's timely and can absolutely have an effect on you making an offer on a property. There is information floating around that there is a massive shortage of appraisers that are causing home sales delays. Quote, according to this article from CNBC, housing demand is rising rapidly, but a key cog on the wheel to home ownership is in deep trouble. The people most needed to close the deal are disappearing. Appraisers, the men and women who value homes and whom mortgage lenders depend upon, are shrinking in numbers. That is causing growing delays in closing, costing buyers and sellers money, in some cases even scuttling deals. So from a practical standpoint, what does this mean for you? Well, I think that if you're writing up an offer, now when I write up an offer here in California, I include a number of days that I give my buyers to sign off on the appraisal contingency. If you don't meet that, that gives the seller an opportunity to back out of the deal. You're much better off if you can live up to those dates. Go in there, add 4 or 5, maybe even 10. Try to calibrate yourself. Don't just talk to your lender. I hate to say it. By and large, lenders are goofy when it comes to being able to answer this question. Is there a delay with your loans relating to appraisals? They're not going to give you an answer. Good folks to talk to about this are title companies, because they're dealing with all different kinds of lenders, they're dealing with all different kinds of folks, but they know when typically they know when those things are getting signed off on. Ask them if they've noticed in their normal stream of business if they've seen longer time frames in terms of getting appraisals done. And even if not, even if you aren't worried about it, or you don't want to do research on it, add a few days to it just so that you're giving yourself a little bit of a buffer. If the seller balks, let them know that you've simply heard news reports that there's a shortage of appraisers and you're trying to accommodate that because you want to absolutely live up to every commitment and set a reliable schedule for the seller to count on. I think that just makes you look better. You can even include a link to the article that I'm going to include in the show notes of today's show so that you can show them you're paying attention and you're not a goofball. One other thing I would suggest you do is look into why we're seeing a shrinking in the number of appraisers. And if you look back, you're going to find regulations. I did shows on this subject when they did it, and this is several years back, because, of course, one of the folks everyone wanted to blame for why we had this horrible bubble in real estate was appraisers. Totally weren't the problem. Any problems you did have with appraisers represented such a small percentage of the deals that were actually going through to call them a contributor. They were statistically insignificant in terms of the number of appraisers that were doing this, any kind of shady stuff. And in all honesty, those kinds of appraisers don't last. They end up getting booted out of the business because the bottom line is they suck at their job. So those folks didn't last. Now we created a middleman, and the amount that appraisers got paid shrunk. They covered a little bit in this article, so you can check it out. But if you want to find out why the number of appraisers is shrinking, I've mentioned several times I had a number of appraiser friends. Well, I have much fewer now because a lot of them have gotten out of the business for this very reason. So anyway, I hope that's valuable information, trying to give you a little bit of good stuff that you can put into any contracts you're writing up right now. Just make sure that you're giving yourself enough time so that you're not having to ask for extensions on timeframes for anything down the road, and it'll keep your deal happy and worry-free. Thanks so much for spending your valuable time with me on this regular Monday through Friday deal we call Real Estate Realities. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'll talk to y'all next time.